Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. What is the Global Partnerships Forum? What is the forum doing to help achieve many of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, such as eliminating poverty, combating climate change, and empowering women? We'll be back in just a moment to talk about these and other important issues. Welcome back to our program. Today we're taking a look at the Global Partnerships Forum and what it's doing to help achieve many of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. My guest today is an expert on the goals and on the forum. My guest today is Mr. Amir Dossal. Mr. Dossal is the chairman of the Global Partnerships Forum. He is a 25-year veteran of the United Nations and served as executive director of the United Nations Office for Partnerships until September 2010. Mr. Dossal is the co-founder of the Pearl Initiative and a special advisor to the UN Global Compact on Strategic Partnerships. He is also the co-founder of an initiative he launched, Ocean Sanctuary Alliance. Mr. Amir Dossal, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Thank you, sir. I'm honored to be here.
It's an honor to have you. Glad we are back together to talk about some of the great things that you're doing. Let's talk a little bit about the Global Partnerships Forum. What exactly is it? When was it formed? Why was it formed? What is your mission?
So our role is basically to help the United Nations build new forms of partnerships with the private sector, civil society, academia. It's quite clear, and Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has stressed time and time again, we cannot do it alone. We need to engage all the actors. And in a small way, we provide that kind of a platform to help build these multi-stakeholder partnerships so that we can accelerate achievement of these huge goals now that we have them, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And we have 17 goals, 169 targets. No government or even a collection of governments can achieve them. We need the leadership role of the private sector. We need the might of civil society implementing projects on the ground. We need data, we need research from academic institutions and so on.
Exactly. And we're going to talk a little bit about what the forum is doing to help bridge that gap between the public and private sectors. And as you mentioned, the private sector is critical. They are absolutely critical. They are the largest job creator. They have the largest amount of money. They are the ones who can really help to achieve those goals. So we're going to move into that. Let's talk a little bit about what you're doing in that area as far as how you're focusing on it and what the forum is doing to help bridge that gap.
So we are basically demand-driven. We help where the UN's gaps are. And the way we engage the private sector is we try and find the value proposition. In other words, the UN looks at the issue of poverty alleviation. Private sector sees it as wealth creation. They create jobs. We need jobs, especially for young people. For example, we work focusing on Africa, attracting new investments to Africa. We try and build these partnerships where companies can work with the UN, work with governments, work with other smaller companies in the region to help build capacity and create long-term sustainability.
Exactly. And we're just coming out, I guess we've been in the 70th session of the United Nations General Assembly. It was launched in September, and of course that's when the Sustainable Development Goals were adopted by the 193 members of the United Nations General Assembly, and you were involved in a variety of different activities to help implement those goals. I might just mention a couple of them here for our viewers because they're very important. And one, you had an African head of states and government investment working group working lunch. What was the purpose of that, and why was that important?
Right. First, I would say we must congratulate Secretary General Ban Ki-moon for being doggedly at this process. Over the last 3 years, he went through the process of engaging all the actors. He had open working group discussions, brought people from the outside. It's the first time ever the UN has had a dialogue with non-state actors. In other words, NGOs, foundations, academic institutions, universities, bilateral institutions, and multilateral institutions. And lo and behold, we have this new global agenda. And we felt that it's important to look at it from the gaps which exist. And Africa, by the way, has been unscathed as a result of the financial crisis, but there's a lot more that needs to be done to address education and health issues. So we brought together a number of heads of state and government, and we had this event at Thomson Reuters, and we worked with the Office of the Special Advisor on Africa, Ambassador Magid Abdulaziz, who takes the lead from the UN side, and then Mr. Hubert Danso, who runs Africa Investor out of South Africa. Three of us came together, and we've done that now for several years. We get presidents and prime ministers to say, how can you ensure that the private sector, when they come into your country, they not only can expect return on capital, but return of capital? This way, we can bring not only the private sector, but also NGOs to do some things. And it was a very lively discussion. And as a result, a number of new programs and projects were adopted.
Exactly.
So which is very exciting.
Exactly. And we can follow up on those to watch the implementation.
Absolutely.
And to see how they come online.
And you know, at the end of the day, it's about opening doors for people from abroad to bring foreign direct investment, so to help build infrastructure in those countries.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And of course, anytime we're talking about development, anytime we're talking about creating this better world, women play a critical role. They are absolutely the epicenter, many people think, of this whole discussion. And you had a couple of events that took place. One was to bring philanthropical leaders together at a United Nations Women's Summit, as I recall, or something. What was the purpose of that, and how did that? What were some of the ideas that came out of it?
Right. So I have to say I admire Madame Fumzeli, who's the executive director of UN Women, and Madame Puri, Lakshmi Puri, who's the deputy, and the whole team. They get it. They know that it's not just about talking to the group of women out there, but it's engaging everybody. So the Business and Philanthropic Leaders Breakfast Forum, which was held, this is on the Saturday before the start of the summit. Jack Ma from Alibaba was there. He co-hosted that with Melinda Gates from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And it was very inspiring. It's about how can we concretely support programs which bring about gender equality and women's empowerment across the globe. And you know, UN Women is a very infant organization. It's 5 years old. Secretary General Ban Ki-moon established that a few years ago. And they don't have enough resources. How can you address the gender gap without resources? So we were honored and delighted to support that effort. In addition, we hosted a First Spouses event where the first spouses of the United Nations came together. They shared their ideas and agreed to redouble their efforts in their own countries. So it's private sector, philanthropic leaders on the one hand, governments on the other, through the leadership role of first spouses.
So these were the spouses of the diplomats from the missions at the United Nations.
Also, the spouses of the presidents and prime ministers.
Presidents and prime ministers,
Yes,
not of the missions.
Exactly. Plus, we were honored to have Laura Turner Seidel, daughter of Ted Turner, and Ted is a special place in the UN. We had Kerry Kennedy, who came, and a number of others who were very inspiring. And they shared their ideas, and they said, that's it, I commit to do X, Y, Z. So that was very helpful.
And if they sign on, it will get done.
Please.
It will happen.
Yes.
It will happen,
Yep.
most assuredly. Now, one group that so often gets left out is people who have developmental disabilities. They may have physical or psychological disabilities, yet in a large number of cases, they have tremendous potential. They have the opportunity to help create this better world and to really to achieve their self-actualization. What type of event did you have? You had a side event with the World Health Organization. Is that right? Focusing on this particular group of people?
So, as you are aware, the UN is finally beginning to actually take really concerted action. Secretary General created an accessibility center here in the Secretariat. WHO has had that mission to address the issue of blindness, disability. How can people have access in their workplaces? And I'm sorry to say that there is inadequate recognition, inadequate implementation of rules and regulations where they exist, or no laws which exist. So WHO came together. They asked us if we could help them bring this agenda to the global arena, and we were honored to do that. So it was the day before the SDG Summit, the Sustainable Goals Summit. We hosted a special event. We had 250 people in the audience, people who've been doing great work. There's the International Disability Alliance, which helped us, the mission of Spain and Portugal and others, Chile, they came together. And it's quite clear that governments are doing work, but they don't know how to tell the story. They do some of these initiatives, they change some of the laws, and sometimes they don't implement the laws, or they don't have the mechanism. And our goal was to share ideas from the private sector. So the American Disabilities Act provides clear guidelines about how you provide an enabling environment for people with disabilities. That kind of model needs to be exported and shared with others. You know, IBM, all the major companies have procedures in place. They also give special entitlements to people with disabilities, blind people who want to come and work. So there's Braille facilities and so on. And we were honored to do that. That was one of the most gratifying things, because you realize that you're only touching the surface when you're doing other things, when you meet people who are struggling in their places and they achieve something.
Exactly. Now, one thing you're trying to do with the Global Partnerships Forum is to become really a knowledge platform.
Yes.
And to partner, to cooperate with other groups. You're dealing with Price Waterhouse. You have a cooperative relationship with them. And tell me a little bit about that. How is this working, and what are you focusing upon to try to develop this knowledge platform?
So it's become quite clear to us that you can suggest people ways of how to partner. So there's an issue of creating a better culture of understanding about corporate culture and so on. But you cannot actually do anything unless you have good data, unless you have knowledge, you have best practice and lessons learned. So we do several things on that score, and we're really privileged to be working with PricewaterhouseCoopers. We have what is called a joint business relationship. So any social initiatives they work on, they come to us for advice. Social programs, we help them build these global alliances, if you like, multi-stakeholder partnerships. We do training of young entrepreneurs, training of women in the workplace, women leaders, so that women are 51% of the population. Yet in the workplace, they represent anywhere between certain countries, naught to a maximum of 20-25%. And we want to help them, if they're senior women in leadership positions, we want to help them retain that and go up further. And we're privileged to do that. And what we are now doing with PwC is creating a platform for enabling new types of partnerships for the Sustainable Development Goals.
Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is an independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guests. We would encourage our viewers to go to the website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view some of the previous programs. Also, we would invite our viewers to offer suggestions for future topics and future guests. Today we're taking a look at a very unique organization that's working to, along with thousands around the world, to focus on the UN Sustainable Development Goals, to eliminate poverty, to have zero hunger in the future, to combat climate change, and looking at some of the interesting things that are taking place. And my guest today is an expert on the forum and also on the Sustainable Development Goals. My guest today is Mr. Amir Dossal. Mr. Amir Dossal is the chairman of the Global Partnerships Forum. We were talking about your platform, your knowledge platform, and what you're doing in this area. Will you be having training programs? Will you be focusing on networking? Will you provide overviews to the private sector or whomever on United Nations activities? And of course, the UN has that whole panoply of UN agencies that are working on this. And how will you get that message out?
So our goal is to try and create new forms of fusion, basically. The UN does many, many good things, but often they don't get the opportunity to share their ideas outside of it, except they're a bit like us, demand-driven. When there is a need, they will find solutions to address them. Through our training programs, and we also have a unique entrepreneurship clinic, which we do with PwC, where we bring social entrepreneurs to share their ideas of what they're doing in the partnership arena. We bring the UN into that discussion to say, okay, here's the policy dialogue that can take place. Here's how you can implement it. Get people to react to those conversations. And it's a very short, sharp, 90-minute program, 4 or 5 speakers with a kind of a guru who will evaluate it. And the idea is very simple. We want people to go away and say, I know how to do this. I want to talk to XYZ person in the room and develop new partnerships. We don't want them to just go away feeling good. We want them to do something.
Exactly. The implementation is just as important as the planning, perhaps even more important to carry it out. Now, our viewers, if they'd like more information, can go to your website.
Yes, please. It's www.partnerships.org. And talking about knowledge platform, we are actually in the process of launching a partnerships portal, which will provide information on projects on the ground. That's a huge task, and I have to say, I cannot take credit for it. My son, who created that concept and is launching that, called SDGs Online, SDG plural S, online.org.
SDGsonline.org.
Yes.
So we invite everyone to take a look at that.
Yes.
Now, before we run out of time, I want to mention another organization. You mentioned the importance of the private sector, and you're absolutely right. In, I think it was 1999, former Secretary General Kofi Annan at the Davos Economic Summit in Davos, Switzerland, came up with the idea for a global compact. And you were a special advisor to the global compact. Briefly, what is the idea behind the global compact, and what are they doing to help focus attention on these problems we're talking about today?
Right. Global Compact mission is very simple. It encourages companies to be good corporate citizens. In other words, they have to agree to 10 principles of the Global Compact, which includes addressing the environment, human rights issues, labor issues, and also anti-corruption. It is not just a question of saying, I want to sign up, where do I sign? It has to be a board resolution passed by the group, sent to the Secretary General, and then they become a member. And then annually, they have to report on what they're doing. And I'm privileged to work with them to support their efforts. In essence, really to build new partnerships. That's what we do.
Exactly. And as I recall, last figure I heard, you have like about 9,000 businesses from around the world, the U.S. and various countries, who voluntarily want to work and to really focus on corporate social responsibility.
Yes, sir. And you can see the amount of impact it has had. Over the last 15 years, there's a huge interest and increase in people wanting to work with the UN. So companies, it's not just 9,000 companies, it's the employees and their network and so on. So it's millions of people who are involved in that process. And I have to give credit to Georg Kell, who was the executive director until a couple of months ago, who started this movement, along with Professor John Ruggie at that time. And they launched this in Davos in 1999. And then when we were managing the Ted Turner partnership, there was a natural relationship. That was about corporate social responsibility. We were about doing projects on the ground.
And I think their website is globalcompact.org, I believe,
Yes,
if I'm not mistaken. So
yes.
our viewers can go to that.
Absolutely.
Well, we've heard so much, and we're hearing more and more every day about climate change.
Right.
It is many people, many observers feel it's the number one problem affecting all 7.3 billion people and all living organisms on planet Earth. Now, you've been involved in dealing with this in a variety of ways, but one is as a co-founder of the Ocean Sanctuary Alliance. What is the Ocean Sanctuary Alliance, and why is it important that we look at it and incorporate it into this whole debate and whole discussion on how we can improve the climate and improve the environment and our ecosystem?
So we, for a number of years, we've been fighting for the issue that ocean represents 2/3 of the Earth, but we've ignored it. People live in coastal communities. They rely, 90% of what we eat, by the way, comes through the sea. But we ignore it. We have plastic gyres in the sea, for example. There's pollution, lack of adequate biodiversity, and so on. So we decided to launch a campaign to have a dedicated ocean SDG in the Sustainable Development Goals. And when I say we, I tell you it was the leadership role of Ambassador Stuart Beck, who was the permanent representative of Palau to the United Nations and now the ambassador for Ocean and Seas for Palau, along with Dr. Ellen Pickich. And we have a wonderful chairman, Mark Newhouse from the Continas Group. We have Ambassador Ramming from the Bahamas. We have Mr. Lindblad. We have a number of people who are part of the team, actually. And we, over the months and years, we started this in 2013. 2 years later, lo and behold, many member states have taken that agenda on. They believe in this. They feel that if we don't care for the oceans, we will be in bad shape. It impacts the climate, it impacts health, it impacts the livelihoods of people. So the goal has been approved. Ocean Sanctuary Alliance is a concrete program to create 10% of the oceans as marine protected areas by 2020. And we are privileged to be working with the Republic of Italy and Ambassador Cardi and his team. And we're honored to have him as the chair of the steering committee, which we are jointly creating. It's very exciting.
It certainly is, and it's very important. It's absolutely critical, and everyone has a role to play. Everybody can play, must, not a matter we must play a role, especially in dealing with climate change.
You know, it's no longer a question of saying, oh, UN is such a big institution, I don't know how to do this. UN is always open for business if you're interested in doing good. And there are ways you can get engaged at the grassroots level. You can work with the United Nations associations in different countries. You can support UNICEF programs in the field. There are a UN Population Fund, UNESCO, etc. All kinds of ways.
Exactly, and there are so many organizations, literally tens of thousands of organizations around the world that are dealing with these problems, and thousands that are working with the United Nations. You and I were talking earlier about the Polio Plus program, Rotary International, teaming up with the World Health Organization, UN Children's Fund to eliminate the scourge of polio. You have Kiwanis International that worked on the iodine deficiency disorder with UNICEF. So there are many opportunities, many ways to be involved, and there are literally millions of people in organizations that are working on these problems to really to help create this better world. But before we run out of time, let me ask you the final question, the hardest question. What do you view as the greatest challenge that we have as we move further into the 21st century and as we focus on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals? What do you see as the major challenge?
I think one of the most important issues we are faced with is how do we partner with other people? You just gave very concrete, great examples, Rotary, Kiwanis, etc. Rotary is synonymous to polio. I'm sorry, not just WHO, but Rotary. I remember Ted Turner had launched this program with Rotary, and WHO, at that time under Dr. Brunton in 2000. That was a historic moment for the United Nations when private sector, civil society, UN, international organizations came together. It's a question of finding ways to work together. It's a question of understanding each other's cultures and no longer saying, this is my turf, that is your turf. It's our turf. We have a responsibility. You just said that. We must work together. We have a responsibility for the 1.6 billion people who live below the poverty line. A responsibility for 732 million children who don't have a proper meal on the table. If we help them, they'll become part of society. They will be better consumers. They'll be better educated. A healthy child will have a better IQ, will become part of society. We'll have more peace and prosperity.
Very good. You've summed it up very nicely. But Amir Dossal, I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
Thank you,
and for
sir.
all the great work you're doing, along with many, many other people, in helping create a better world.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us today on Global Connections Television.